In the stillness of dawn, beneath the arid skies of the Middle East, a global artery pulses with a fragile rhythm. The Strait of Hormuz, narrow, shimmering, ancient, has long served as the lifeblood of global energy. Yet today its waters are eerily still. In a bold and startling maneuver, Iran has sealed the passage. Like a lion in the tall grass asserting dominance over a savanna, it has brought the world's most critical maritime corridor to a sudden halt. No oil moves. No ships dare cross. The silence is not peaceful, it is electric. Across the globe, the tremors are felt. Oil prices spike in frantic markets. Traders stare in disbelief. Fuel pumps in distant cities run dry. Flights are cancelled. Stock exchanges wobble under the weight of uncertainty. The economic machine, so accustomed to perpetual motion, now stutters and grinds. In the deep blue waters, the consequences begin to churn. Naval fleets, bristling with tension and weaponry, converge like wolves encircling a wounded stag. The sea becomes a theatre of uncertainty, where a single spark, an errant missile, a misread signal, could ignite a firestorm. Above the waves, seabirds circle. Below, dolphins and whales navigate a maze of halted freighters and warships. The ocean, once a place of calm migration and ancient song, becomes disturbed by man's political rage. And yet, amid this high-stakes standstill, the truest cost is borne by the human soul. The factory worker in India awaiting fuel deliveries, the nurse in Europe coping with blackouts, the family in Africa watching prices soar beyond reach. A shared panic spreads, not just fear of economic collapse, but of the unknown. This is not merely a political incident. It is a testament to how deeply intertwined our fates have become. One strait, one choice, one closure, and the world holds its breath. And so, with every ripple that laps the rocky coastlines of Iran and Oman, we are reminded the heartbeat of the modern world is delicate. And when that rhythm is broken, even for a moment, the echoes are thunderous. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow, strategically crucial waterway situated between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Stretching only about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, it serves as the most vital choke point for the global oil supply. Every day, around 20% of the world's petroleum, nearly 17 to 20 million barrels, passes through this narrow corridor aboard massive oil tankers. Countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Iraq and Kuwait depend on this route to transport their oil to international markets, particularly in Asia, Europe and the Americas. Because these nations lack viable alternatives, the strait effectively serves as the world's energy jugular vein. Its closure, or even disruption, sends immediate shockwaves through global energy markets. This maritime gateway holds more than just economic significance. It is also of immense geopolitical value. The nations bordering it, Iran and Oman, stand as gatekeepers to the energy supplies of multiple continents. Any disruption in the strait can trigger not only price volatility, but also strategic recalculations by major global powers. The United States, China, India and European countries all rely, directly or indirectly, on the steady flow of oil and liquefied natural gas through this passage. Due to its crucial nature, the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet is permanently stationed in the region to help ensure freedom of navigation. Likewise, Iran has long considered the Strait as leverage in times of political or military tension. Tehran has repeatedly warned that if it is threatened through sanctions or military action, it has the capability and the right to close the strait. Beyond its modern-day relevance, the Strait of Hormuz is steeped in historical importance. For centuries, it has been a gateway between East and West, a conduit not just for oil, but for commerce, culture, and conquest. Today, its relevance has intensified in a world more dependent than ever on fossil fuel flows. The vulnerability of this narrow stretch of water exemplifies how a small point on the globe can wield outsized influence on global stability. Its strategic centrality makes it a flashpoint where diplomacy, energy politics, and military power intersect, creating a volatile but unavoidable reality. For the modern world, Iran's decision to shut the Strait of Hormuz is not a spontaneous act, but rather a calculated strategic move in response to mounting international pressures and rising regional tensions. For years, Iran has used the strait as a tool of deterrence, often threatening to close it if pushed beyond its tolerance threshold. This time, however, the threat became a reality. The closure followed a series of escalating provocations, including intensified economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and increased military presence by the United States and its allies in the Gulf. Iran views these actions as existential threats aimed at crippling its economy, especially its vital oil exports, which are already struggling under global sanctions. In retaliation, Tehran resorted to one of its most powerful pressure tactics, sealing off the narrow sea route through which much of the world's oil flows. The decision was executed with both symbolism and precision. Iranian naval forces and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps deployed fast attack boats, missile systems and underwater mines to restrict movement through the strait. Satellite images revealed vessels repositioned to form blockades, while Iranian officials confirmed the deployment of coastal defense systems to deter any foreign intervention. The global community responded swiftly but cautiously. Military strategists recognized the act as not merely defensive, but a bold challenge to Western dominance and maritime freedom in one of the world's most sensitive areas. By closing the strait, Iran sought not only to exert control over energy flows, but also to force the world, particularly the United States and its allies, to reckon with the cost of isolation and confrontation. This action sent a loud message. If Iran's economy is to suffer, then so too will the global economy. The move also played to domestic audiences, presenting Iran as a sovereign nation refusing to be bullied into submission. Meanwhile, oil markets reacted immediately, with prices surging and supply chains thrown into chaos. The global energy infrastructure, deeply reliant on the uninterrupted passage of oil tankers through Hormuz, was instantly disrupted, proving just how effective Iran's move was as a geopolitical lever. The act of shutting the strait was not just a regional maneuver, but a direct signal to the entire international order that Iran remains a force to be reckoned with. The global economic ripple effect, triggered by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, was immediate and profound. As soon as reports confirmed the blockade, international oil markets reacted with panic. Crude oil prices surged dramatically within hours, reflecting the extreme sensitivity of global markets to disruptions in oil supply. Given that nearly 1/5 of the world's oil passes through this choke point daily, even a temporary shutdown sends shockwaves through the financial system. Traders on Wall Street in London, Tokyo and Dubai scrambled to adjust forecasts and hedge against looming volatility. The The Brent and WTI indices, the main benchmarks for crude oil, saw double-digit percentage increases, a sign of severe market anxiety. Fuel prices at consumer levels began climbing rapidly in many parts of the world. In countries heavily dependent on imports, such as India, Japan and South Korea, governments were forced into emergency meetings to address possible shortages and inflation. Airlines started grounding flights or rerouting them at higher operational costs. Shipping companies faced delays as vessels either idled at sea or were forced to detour thousands of miles, further increasing transportation expenses. The cascading effect of this disruption didn't stop at oil. As fuel costs rose, so did the prices of food, manufactured goods and public services. The cost of doing business escalated globally, pushing inflation higher and threatening fragile post-pandemic economic recoveries. Financial markets also faced a confidence crisis. Stock indices dipped across the globe, particularly in sectors like aviation, manufacturing and transportation. Investors flocked to safer assets like gold and government bonds, anticipating long-term uncertainty. Central banks began to reassess their monetary policies, torn between containing inflation and avoiding economic slowdowns. For poorer nations, the consequences were even more dire. Heavily indebted countries that rely on fuel subsidies faced pressure to cut those subsidies or risk collapsing their national budgets. This added social unrest to the list of unfolding challenges. The economic instability extended beyond the oil markets. Insurance premiums for ships transiting near the Gulf skyrocketed. Logistic delays triggered contract disputes and supply shortages for major industries, from automobile manufacturing in Germany to fertilizer distribution in Africa. A single geographic point had effectively destabilized multiple pillars of the global economy. The world, deeply interconnected and oil-dependent, now found itself at the mercy of a narrow strip of water and a regional power willing to use it as a fulcrum of geopolitical leverage. The military mobilizations and naval tensions surrounding the Strait of Hormuz escalated rapidly following its closure by Iran. Within hours of the announcement, regional and international powers began repositioning their forces in and around the Persian Gulf, anticipating the possibility of confrontation. The United States, which maintains a constant naval presence through its Fifth Fleet based in Bahrain, dispatched additional aircraft carriers, guided missile destroyers and surveillance aircraft to assert freedom of navigation and deter any aggressive moves. The United Kingdom, France and other NATO members also began to mobilize assets, sending warships to secure commercial shipping routes and protect their national interests. The Strait became crowded with military hardware, with ships from rival nations operating in dangerously close proximity, heightening the risk of miscalculation. Iran, in turn, reinforced its positions by deploying fast attack boats, submarines, coastal missile batteries, and drones capable of surveillance and attack. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps intensified patrols and naval drills, signaling their readiness for confrontation and their control over the region's most sensitive choke point. The presence of ballistic and anti-ship missiles along the Iranian coast added a dangerous edge to the standoff. International shipping lanes became militarized zones, where the slightest error or provocation could trigger a deadly chain reaction. Intelligence agencies across the globe remained on high alert, monitoring the region for any signs of escalation that could lead to war. This environment of high tension also saw the emergence of electronic warfare, with jamming, spoofing, and cyber attacks suspected in the disruption of navigation and communication systems aboard ships. Commercial vessels were instructed to travel with caution, often in convoys under naval escort, resembling the strategic tactics used during times of open conflict. The situation sparked emergency meetings at the United Nations, where calls for de-escalation clashed with accusations and warnings between global powers. Amid this precarious atmosphere, the international community braced for the possibility of an unintended incident. A misfired missile, an accidental collision, or an aggressive interception, spiraling into a full-scale conflict. The balance of power at sea had shifted dangerously toward confrontation, with the Strait of Hormuz transformed from a trade artery into a high-stakes chessboard. Each military move, each ship repositioned, became a statement, a gamble, and a test of resolve in a region known for its volatility and historic rivalries. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz had a direct and damaging impact on the surrounding marine environment and global maritime operations. As commercial vessels, particularly oil tankers and container ships, were forced to halt or reroute, the usual flow of traffic through this narrow waterway came to a standstill. Dozens of ships waited in limbo, either anchored in clusters or circling in holding patterns. These idling ships, burning fuel to maintain basic operations, contributed to a spike in marine pollution. The waters of the Strait, already burdened by industrial and shipping activity, faced an overload of noise, oil residue and chemical waste, threatening the delicate marine ecosystems that live beneath the surface. The Strait of Hormuz is home to a diverse range of marine life, including dolphins, sea turtles, reef fish, and endangered whales. These species rely on a stable, quiet environment to navigate, breed, and communicate. The sudden increase in naval activity, sonar usage, and ship congestion disrupted these natural behaviors. Many marine animals are highly sensitive to changes in water acoustics, and the heightened underwater noise pollution from military vessels and supertankers created an unnatural and stressful habitat. This disruption, although invisible to the human eye, can lead to long-term consequences such as migration pattern changes, feeding disruption, or even mass strandings in sensitive areas. In addition to the ecological strain, the maritime impact extended to global shipping operations. With Hormuz blocked, vessels were forced to take alternate and significantly longer routes around Africa via the Cape of Good Hope. This increased voyage time by weeks, raising fuel consumption, shipping costs, and delivery delays. Ports downstream, in Asia, Europe, and North America, faced scheduling chaos, causing congestion, container shortages, and logistical breakdown. Industries that rely on just-in-time supply chains, such as electronics, automotive, and agriculture, began reporting delays in production and distribution. Port authorities and maritime insurers responded by elevating risk ratings for the region, which triggered sharp increases in insurance premiums for shipping companies. Some smaller fleets were unable to afford the added costs, effectively locking them out of international trade routes. Meanwhile, crews on board the stranded ships faced uncertainty and extended duty, often without proper support or access to shore facilities. The incident revealed the environmental and operational fragility of maritime trade, and underscored how dependent global commerce is on a single, narrow corridor surrounded by ecological and political volatility. The human consequences of Iran's closure of the Strait of Hormuz extended far beyond the immediate region, sparking fear, uncertainty, and disruption across continents. For everyday citizens around the world, the effects were felt in fuel prices, food costs, and growing economic instability. In oil-dependent countries, consumers watched as fuel stations raised prices overnight. Transport costs surged, leading to increased fares for buses, trains and flights. As supply chains broke down, supermarkets began experiencing shortages of essential goods, and small businesses found themselves unable to afford rising overhead costs. The psychological impact of this sudden shift created a wave of anxiety among populations already struggling with inflation and post-pandemic recovery. In developing nations, the impact was particularly severe. Many rely on subsidized fuel imports, and the closure of the Strait meant that their governments either had to absorb the soaring costs or pass them on to citizens. In both cases, the result was public anger, street protests, and calls for political change. People in rural areas who depend on fuel for agriculture and transport faced devastating consequences as crops went unharvested, deliveries stalled, and equipment remained idle. The closure didn't just choke oil flow, it strangled the flow of daily life for millions. In the Middle East, the situation was even more precarious. Gulf states prepared for the possibility of regional escalation, with civilians stocking up on supplies, fearing airstrikes or sudden border closures. Iranian citizens, while watching their government take a bold geopolitical stand, also bore the consequences of retaliation and sanctions. Fear of war, economic isolation and internal crackdowns grew. Many began transferring savings, hoarding basic goods, and preparing for possible conflict. The international media fueled global anxiety with non-stop coverage showing satellite images of warships, tankers and blockades. Social media platforms amplified the panic, spreading both real-time footage and unverified claims, creating a digital atmosphere of alarm. Schools, hospitals and public infrastructure in affected nations began initiating emergency protocols, bracing for prolonged disruption. Meanwhile, diplomatic leaders scrambled to de-escalate the crisis, but citizens around the world were left watching, waiting. What began as a geopolitical maneuver quickly morphed into a human crisis, one that underscored how a single strategic decision could ripple into the lives of ordinary people everywhere, making them involuntary participants in a drama they neither started nor could control. In the unfolding chaos surrounding the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, we are reminded just how interconnected our modern world truly is. A single decision by a regional power has brought global markets to their knees, ignited military posturing on an international scale, strained delicate marine ecosystems, disrupted the daily operations of global trade, and, most crucially, shaken the lives of millions of ordinary people. The Strait, narrow in geography but vast in significance, has become more than just a maritime passage. It is now a symbol of the fragile balance upon which our planet rests. It reveals the sharp edge of dependence, the deep vulnerability of peace, and the price we all pay when diplomacy fails. The world holds its breath, not just in fear of war, but in hope that reason will prevail, dialogue will resume, and this vital artery of civilization will flow freely once more. Thank you for joining us on this journey through tension, consequence, and global connection. May we all strive for a world where understanding defeats aggression and cooperation guides our shared future. Stay informed, stay aware, and above all, stay hopeful. Good luck, and thank you for listening.